In 1907, in London, 3-year-old Dorothy Eady was playing at her home, and while playing, Dorothy suddenly fell down the stairs, because of which she got a deep wound on her head. When her parents came to her, they saw that Dorothy was not breathing. They called the doctor, and the doctor declared Dorothy dead. Dorothy's mother started crying, and she was not even trying to keep quiet. An hour later, Dorothy's mother suddenly became quiet, and the reason for her silence was a sound that echoed throughout the house. When Dorothy's mother ran after the sound, she saw that Dorothy was playing with her toys in her room. It felt as if nothing had happened to her. When the doctor came back and checked her, the doctor found that she was completely healthy, and only the wound was left. The doctor was so shocked that he couldn't even understand how she was alive. He called her a miracle and left the house. Now, Dorothy's truth will be revealed to you. How Hinduism and Christianity are connected. But there is something else that will shock you. Dorothy was born in London in 1904. She was living her life like a normal child, until she fell down the stairs. After falling down the stairs, she started having strange dreams at night. In these dreams, she found herself in a huge building, in a green garden. Every night, she had the same dream. And when she woke up from her dream, she would scream out loud that she wanted to go home. When her mother would tell her that she was at home, she would get depressed. Sometimes Dorothy's parents would find her crying under the dining table. They would ask her, "What happened? Why are you crying?" And she would say, "I want to go home." When her mother would tell her that she was at home, she would say, "I don't know, but I want to go home." Another thing that happened after she fell down the stairs was that she would sometimes speak in a very heavy foreign accent. It felt like someone from another country was speaking to her, which was very strange. One day, Dorothy's parents went out of the house. They took Dorothy to the British Museum. When they arrived, they saw a huge change in Dorothy's behavior. When her parents brought Dorothy to the Egyptian exhibit, she was so happy that she started crying. She ran and started touching the statues there. She started kissing the feet of the statues. She started scolding people, asking them how they could come to God with shoes. After that, she came to her mother in a glass. When she reached her mother, she calmed down. And then she said in an old woman's voice, "These are my own people." Yes, that's what she said. After that, Dorothy's parents took her out of the museum for 2 hours, because she was not taking the name of getting out of the museum. So they forced her to leave the museum, and she kept crying. After this incident, whenever her parents got time, they took Dorothy to the museum to make her happy, where she felt very happy and good. When she was 7 years old, Dorothy's father brought a book of Egyptian subjects for her. Dorothy was very happy. She kept looking at the hieroglyphics for hours. Hieroglyphics means this picture. It is called Kitrilipi. She kept looking at it for hours, and when her mother asked her what she was doing, she said she was trying to remember something. One day Dorothy was reading Science magazine. She saw a picture of a temple in Egypt. It was a place called Abydos in Egypt. Dorothy called her mother and said, "Mom, look at this picture. This is my home." Dorothy was confused. She was wondering where the tree and the big green garden was. She smiled and said she was very happy. She was saying to her mother, "Mama, this is my home. This is my home." I want to tell you something before I tell you what happened in Dorothy's story about Hinduism. So we were talking about Dorothy. Before moving forward in Dorothy's story, I wanted to tell you some things. First, you listen to this. These stories of remembering the past of children are very common, which is often misheard. Because who believes in children? Many parents have written stories of their children's past. Other than that, there are countless cases which have not been reported, and among those documented cases, a true incident which proves the rebirth is related to the Second World War, when the Japanese soldiers shot down an American fighter plane, and that plane sank into the sea, which was being flown by the American fighter pilot, James Houston Jr., who died on March 3, 1945 in the cockpit. In the cockpit. But after 50 years of that incident, James Leninger, 2 years old. James had a child, Jay. He saw a fighter plane in his dreams. He was flying it himself, but it crashed. He drowned in the sea and died. When the child began to tell his parents that he was a pilot, his parents showed him some photos of his aircraft. He told them which aircraft he flew. He told them the names of the aircraft carriers on which he was stationed. He even told his fellow pilots about it when he was only 2 years old. All this information can be false, but no, these things were true and verified. The bad history is more of the peaceful history of his life. This case was a little different from Dorothy's case, because in similar cases, it was found that the memories of the last birth of these children started at the age of 2 and ended at the age of 5. But this did not happen in the case of Dorothy Eady. As she grew up, her memory became clearer, and she found out in a short time that she had no memory of the last birth. And you will be surprised when you will hear that the link of her last birth was connected to 3,000 years ago. Dorothy Eady used to speak openly about her rebirth, and she did not care about what people think about her. Because of this, she used to hear a lot of people's stories. Her Sunday school teacher even threw her out of the church, because she said that there is no existence of Christianity. She came out of the old Egyptian religion. However, now we have got this evidence that this can be possible. But then people were very strict about Christianity. After this, Dorothy spent most of her time in the Egyptian museum, although her dreams continued. But this time, she was not afraid of those dreams. When Dorothy was 15 years old, she would wake up every night from her bed. She would hear the voice of a man, and that man would tell his name Horror. He would tell her to write everything that he was saying. After which she would go into a trance state. She would sleep half asleep and half awake. She would start writing something on paper. Along with that, she would start making hieroglyphics. When she would wake up in the morning, she would not remember anything, what she did at night and what she wrote. This was not even her own handwriting. Within a year, she had more than 70 handwritten pages, on which she had written her own past. That is, the story of Dorothy's last birth. Who was she? It was all written on those papers. That is, who was she 3,000 years ago? Now she knows. But now you will also know. 3,000 years ago, there was an Egyptian woman. Her name was Bent Rashid. She lived in Egypt's Abydos. Her father was a soldier in the kingdom of Defies, and her mother used to sell vegetables. When Bent Rashid was 2 years old, her mother passed away. Her father was unable to raise her, so her father sent her to a temple where she could become a priest. When Bent Rashid was 12 years old, she was given two options. Either she could leave the temple, or she could live in the same temple, but she could not marry. She chose to live in the temple. But after a few years, she fell in love with someone, and the person she fell in love with was Defies, who was the king of that time. They had an affair for a long time, but she became pregnant, and when the senior priest of that time came to know about it, the priest, or the pandits, said that your sin is so great that you will have to be punished for your death. But there was no chance of being punished, because the king was not defamed. So, Bent Rashid committed suicide. Now, let's come to Bent Rashid's next birth. That is, Dorothy. Dorothy had understood everything, which had been happening to her for so many years. After that, her life continued. For a few years, she worked in the theater of her parents. After that, in 1931, she got a big break in her life. When Egyptian Relation magazine offered her a job, while working in that magazine, she met a rich Egyptian man. His name was Iman Abdul Migit. They got married in 1933. After that, for the first time in her life, she set foot on the land of Egypt. I mean, in her second life. As soon as she got off the ship, she fell on her knees, and she kissed the ground. Her eyes were filled with tears, and she said, "Finally, I have reached my home." Dorothy's marriage did not start well. Her in-laws were very rich, and they did not like Dorothy to be too open. That too, about her past life. Although, she was more committed to the Egyptian culture than her husband's family. Anyway, her life continued. She gave birth to a boy. His name was Sati. That is, in the name of her lover from her previous birth. She changed her name to Sati, which means Sati's mother, because in ancient Egypt, women were called by their sons, like Rowan's mother. After a few years, she got divorced from her husband. In 1935, she was appointed as the head of the Egyptian department and started working in the Department of Antiquity. She was the first woman hired there. She made her name in this area. She helped translate hieroglyphics, although she never took formal training, but she was still translating, and she became an expert in this field. In 1952, she started working in Abydos, the same Abydos which she considered her real home. That too, since childhood. There, she studied her ancient religion. She used to walk barefoot there and spent her nights praying in an Egyptian temple, and she would sleep there. In 1957, she came and in 1957, the new chief of antiquity thought of testing Dorothy's knowledge. That is, she was going to test her, because as she spoke, it seemed that she knew everything about ancient Egyptian culture. But the chief was not ready to admit that 3,000 years ago, this woman used to live here. So one night, she went to see Dorothy. She took Dorothy to an unknown temple. She had only one torch, and she told Dorothy, now, with the power of her memory, take me to different parts of the temple. Until this time, nothing was published about the temple and about the layout of the temple, and Dorothy had never been there before, and even the chief knew this. But as soon as she entered there, Dorothy first told her the name of the temple, and then wherever the chief asked Dorothy to go. Dorothy gave the chief away there, without any light. Dorothy knew every inch of the temple. Every time the chief asked her, he would give the right answer and take her to the right place. And finally, the chief accepted defeat. Dorothy's dream was also the garden of the Temple of Sati. But that garden had not been discovered by the archaeologist yet. Dorothy pointed with her finger to dig here. She said, you will find a garden down here. And when she dug there was actually a garden down there. And she also said that if she digs in the north side of the temple, she will find a tunnel at a specific place. And that's what happened. She found that tunnel. She was 60 years old in 1964, and according to Egyptian law, she had to retire now. But Dorothy was special. Despite being over 60 years old, she was given special permission to work, because Dorothy knew what no one else knew. I don't know how, but Dorothy made a lot of discoveries. She did that only by remembering things from her past lives. Although her speciality was the Temple of Sati, she said that she had knowledge of other places as well. Like she said that the grave of Nefertiti, or tomb, which the researchers had not yet found. She said that it was under the tomb of her great-grandson, King Tut. Dorothy claimed this in 1972. The tomb of King Tut was found only in 1922, even after 50 years of study. She did not find any chamber under it, but in 2015, radar imaging technology proved that where Dorothy said that the tomb was there, she did not find it before. She went there after scanning in 2015. Dorothy also said that where the Sphinx statue was, there was a library under it, but no one believed her. But in 2015, it was also exposed. The library was also there, as Dorothy had said many years ago, but she did not survive to find out. Dorothy also said that Hinduism is very similar to our religion. It is very similar to Egyptian culture. Like idol worship, more than 50% of Indians believe in rebirth, because it is a part of Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, and Buddhism. For example, the present Dalai Lama is the 14th rebirth of Pema Dorje, and how the new Dalai Lama is found. His story is also very interesting. I will tell you about it later. But there are many religions in which the existence of rebirth is not accepted. For example, maybe in Christianity, rebirth is not accepted. And maybe in Islam. I do not know whether they believe it or not. Whatever Muslim brother is watching the video, do tell me in the comments below whether you believe in rebirth or not. See, rebirth is such a topic that gives us peace of mind and despair. Because if it is true, then it gives us a little comfort that we will come back after death, whether we remember our old birth or not. And the despair is that, will we always be stuck in this cycle of rebirth? Will we never go to heaven? But now, I am not able to stop myself from thinking that maybe at this time, there will be a child who will have some strange visions and dreams. Some will be in the fighter jet, some in the big green jungle. But they must be thinking, why? Why are we having these dreams? Are you not one of them? Over and out. If you want more stories like this, please subscribe.